So last session of the day. Thanks for sticking with us. We saved the best till last. And I think one of the themes we've certainly been seeing today is that we're really only scratching the surface of what's possible. And there are massive business opportunities out there. And it's super hard to navigate our way through the maze as to what's going to be big, what is going to be the next big thing. And so we invited some esteemed investors, some early, some late stage, to come up and help us calibrate that opportunity and also give us hopefully some insight in where they're placing their bets for the future. So with that, I'd like to invite the moderator, Cable from Interwest Partners. He did such a fantastic job last year, we thought we'd invite him up to do the same again. So Cable and the team, come on up. Give them a big round of applause.
Thank you, sir.
That's all right.
Come on up.
Thank you.
I'll just give you a high five.
High five.
Thank you, Richard, and great job today putting up with the fake accent. And just to be completely transparent, I placed my bet on Flurry. I'm an investor, and I'm on the board of Flurry. So great to be here, and thanks for inviting us back. I know we're the last panel between you guys and happy hour out there, so we'll try to be short and sweet and talk about money and keep you awake. But we talked sort of behind the stage about doing a seventh inning stretch if you guys are baseball folks. So, but instead of doing that, what we might want to do is, take your favorite yoga pose and do it. Stretch your arms, whatever it is. Loosen up. 30 seconds. For me, it's breathing deeply, so I'm going to do that. With that, all right. So, we have an esteemed panel here of investors who do everything from early stage, late stage, consumer, enterprise, U.S., international. And I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves in a minute. But before we do that, I want to do a quick poll of the audience so that we know who's out here and what kind of interest you might have. So quick show of hands. How many of you have an Android phone? Okay. How many of you have Google Glass? All right. You can raise your hand. I think everybody's using Uber now, so you've forgotten how to hail a cab. You can do it this way. Go up. Don't be shy. How many of you have an Oculus device? Anyone?
No one.
One, back there. All right. Thank you. Are you an investor in Oculus or founder? Negative. All right. How many of you are raising money right now as an entrepreneur? Okay, a handful. All right, so that gives us a good sort of sampling of who's out there. One of the things I want to talk about, Simon mentioned, there is $1 trillion of opportunities still ahead of us in mobile, right? You heard us talk. And if you do sort of the basic VC math, to get to that $1 trillion in opportunity, you got to invest $100 billion. That's like a 10x multiple, right? And so the question is, I think somebody made a comment earlier in the day that the investors have moved on beyond mobile, that they've moved on to Google Glass, and I think Simon called it the virtual reality binoculars. Is that what he said? And so the question is, have they? And we're going to ask these folks here on the panel whether mobile is the last big thing or mobile is still the thing. So with that, why don't we start, Sharon? Take a minute to introduce yourselves, and then we'll ask you a question. One other thing, this is audience participation, so I have a couple of questions, but I'm asking you guys to line up yours, and we'll do a very interactive session. Sharon.
Sure. Hi, so I'm Sharon Weinbar. I'm a partner with Scale Venture Partners. I'm really grateful to be back here for a second year. Scale Venture Partners, we invest in companies that are scaling, most often very early in the scaling phase, so after product market fit, when you have a channel to market that is working, you're raising money just basically to spend on sales and marketing with a pretty high reliability to grow the business. Most recent prominent mobile investment we made is Criticism, which is actually has a nice cohort of other co-investors here. So did you want us to talk about?
Hold on to that. We'll come back. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Just let's do the intros quickly. Haney?
Really hard name. Haney Nada. It's actually Egyptian, if you care to look me up. I'm a partner, one of the founders of GGV Capital. We're a 14-year-old firm. We have about a little more than $2 billion under management now. We typically invest between $10 and $20 million into a company. And so, we typically do B and C rounds, not a lot of A's, and right now, not a lot of D's because of the crazy valuations. We focus on the US and China. Half our investments, half our team is in Shanghai, the other half is here in the US, and we do a lot of cross-border work with our portfolio companies. Do a lot in the gaming space, the digital media space, and that's why I think I'm fairly interested in the mobile sector.
Cool. My name is Sandeep Hichu. I'm with a group called Felicis Ventures. I'm the early money on this panel. We manage about $100 million across 2 funds. We were early into mobile in a bunch of companies, Rovios, SoundHound, Credit Karma, and there's a whole range of other companies, about 20 companies I think we invested back in the time when people believed that, or no one believed that mobile would be a big business. We were the first ones, I think, to come out and say there's going to be $1 billion mobile company, and now I think even 10 billion people shrug. So hopefully we'll see a much larger company come out of that. But I'm excited to be here. One of the things that I really wanted to do before this panel was actually survey our companies and find out how many of them actually use Flurry. I suspect it's a high number. I don't think it's as high as AWS yet, but I hope it'll get there.
Great. I think we just announced that about 500,000 apps use Flurry, so maybe 1 in every 2 apps at least.
50%.
Well, so question for each of you. Talk about an investment that you made in the mobile space, and maybe through that, give us a lens on your investment strategy, what you're looking for in mobile. Sharon, start with that.
Sure. I mean, so it's funny to hear you say early to mobile, where Haney and I were really early to mobile because literally 2004 was the year of mobile, when for almost 10 years it was the year of mobile, the year of mobile, the year of mobile. And 2004 was the first year that there were 10 million handsets shipped that had a graphics processor and a color screen. And that really was the year of mobile, and the year that there started to be a mobile content business, and that was the year I invested in Glue Mobile, and Haney joined the board there shortly thereafter. So there was that early consumer business in mobile, and then the iPhone came late in 2007, completely disrupted that, and then now mobile devices have pervaded all sorts of businesses, and have become ubiquitous as business tools too. And so that's informing a lot of the Scale VP investment thesis on mobile. I actually sat here last year and said, we think the combination of cloud and mobile changes everything from a development standpoint and for mainstream businesses. So we had a panel here earlier this afternoon of the retailers who were saying, they still run a different division between the brick and mortar stores and the online business, not to mention mobile. So there's this huge wave of latent transition for enterprise infrastructure and enterprise delivery to mobile, because that's where the consumers are, and it's, the business services are very late in coming to where the people are. So that's a lot of what Scale VP is focused on this year, is on tools that help corporations build better mobile apps, build better mobile and cloud experiences. The most recent investment we made, as I said, is that we announced is Criticism, which is an application performance management framework for mobile, which it has other large incumbents in the web, for example, New Relic, and that there were each generation of development architecture has spawned a new leader in the monitoring and management space. And so our bet is that for mobile, it will require a new leader, and that the Criticism could be that.
That's great. Haney?
So it's interesting. When was the last mobile investment? That's a really tough question, because if the internet is air, I think mobile is like water. Just about every investment we make touches mobile in one form or the other. And even our investments in hardware companies end up being in mobile products. So it's really hard for me to delineate. If I think about what's happening in computing, and the fact now we have very powerful computers in our hands, walking around in our hands, doesn't really change what you need to do or how you do it, but you become more efficient. So efficiency is one of the biggest things that mobile has changed. The user experience have gotten vastly better because of these mobile devices. They have to get better because you got a smaller screen. It's not ugly Windows XP anymore. It's a pretty robust and intuitive way. I mean, my 5-year-old can pick up a phone. I shouldn't call it a phone, a mobile device now, and order pizza. And so, and there was no way that we should have done on Windows XP. So when you say, when was your last mobile investment? I think the last investment made was a mobile investment. I think the last investment actually was a company that does fantasy sports, gaming, big gaming here. So we did a fantasy sports company, and mobile is a huge channel for these guys. So everything is mobile.
I'll pick a slightly different company based on what you guys picked. I think you picked business, you picked a consumer application. I'm going to pick a consumer application too, but it's kind of related much more to the intrinsic capabilities of mobile. So one of the things that people forget about mobile is that there are some capabilities on mobile that weren't available with any other PC. One of my favorite things is a company called Matterport. What they figured out is using a 3D camera, which is available in a Kinect, which is hopefully will be available on a tablet and a phone pretty soon. You can essentially swivel around this room, and they can create a 3D model out of that. So if you think about like the capabilities and what it does to real estate marketing, insurance companies, readjustments, and construction, floor plans, things like that, interior design, the number of industries that's going to touch is going to be pretty remarkable. So one of the things that we kind of look for is, is there a mobile first-class experience which did not even exist in the web before? If that is the case, then that's even better, right? Mm-hmm. But even the older businesses can be completely reimagined for mobile and can be made maybe like 5 to 10 times better. Acompli, one of the companies that we had backed, is out here. That's a tremendous company, mainly because it took email and it said, what can you do if you have only a limited form factor? And there's a few things that you can do that you could not do on your desktop.
Great. So you mentioned about sort of reinventing the existing business using mobile or looking for mobile-first opportunities. You guys see lots of companies in your portfolio, entrepreneurs coming and present to you. What are some of the best practices or things that you've seen that have caught your eye and say, here's a company that's really taken advantage of the mobile platform, things that were not possible before, or reinvention?
The coolest company I've seen recently, it's very early. I'm not sure if it's a mobile company or what company, but it wouldn't have worked without a mobile experience. So think about Nest. I love Nest. I have Nests all over my house. The beauty about Nest is that it takes about a week for it to figure out everything, and then you never touch it again. And so along the same lines, we've seen companies that are doing that for irrigation, for your lawn sprinkler. We've seen companies that are doing very interesting things with fitness. So saw a company that's building a shirt with 17 sensors in the shirt. This shirt can predict when you're going to have a heart attack. This shirt can tell you how fatigued you are. This shirt can tell you what your blood oxygen level is. It does all this really cool technical stuff, but the biggest use for it is it can predict when you're stressed and what you should do to remove that stress. So it says, for example, hey, you're about to meet Sharon, and Haney, do you know every time you meet Sharon, your heart rate goes up by X% and your blood, and you get stressed. Stop meeting Sharon. And so I think there's a lot of interesting technologies that, because this mobile device has everything in it, the more they are connected, the more they are interrelated, the better off those experiences become. And so my point is, I think the things that are really intriguing is connecting the dots between the separate applications. The problem with this thing is like they're all silos. And with those silos, it's very difficult to be as productive as you could be. There's a really cool app called Refresh. I'm not sure if anybody uses it.
Yeah.
It's a great app. Before I walk in, because I have a bad memory, it's like, oh, Sharon Weinbar, I've done this with her, this with her, this with her. So I have a sense of the meeting. So the more that happens, the better off I think we are.
Yeah. Hinim, you made a good point. If I'm hearing you right, you don't look at a company as a mobile company or a non-mobile company. Everything is mobile, and mobile is in everything, if that's that correct? Yeah. So how does an entrepreneur approach you? What do you look for? How do you filter a pitch? If somebody were to reach out to you after this presentation, what would they say?
So it really depends. Look, I think when you're investing in a company, I have a mentality of start to finish. Okay, really cool market, product that's differentiated and strong, and a team that can execute to build into the product, take that product into the market. And all three are important. And depending on the sector you're in, for the consumer market, I think the most important is to have a marketing-oriented CEO or product-focused CEO. If you're going after an enterprise market, a technical founder is probably best, or someone who's been in enterprise sales is probably the best. So the team is really, really important, and it's important based on what the potential exit's going to be. Market, you have to have a big market. There's two types of markets. There's markets where you're going to kill an incumbent. So it's an existing market. You know it's there. You know those dollars get spent, but you're cheaper, better, faster. That's one profile. And then there's a market that's brand new. You're building a brand new market that doesn't exist before. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into this soup to decide, to figure out whether we're going to invest or not. There's no formula.
Yeah, and staying with you for a little bit longer, and when you talk about market...
You pick on me now?
Well, you got the shirt going for you, so that's good. You also invest internationally, in a lot of investments in China. Are there certain differences you see in companies that are in China versus companies that are here in either execution or strategy?
Yeah, a lot. There's a lot of big differences. I think the strategies in China have to be much more local based. So for example, there's no advertising market, really not a big advertising market in China. So Chinese companies, especially consumer focused, which they all are, consumer focused Chinese companies have to figure out how to monetize their users differently. You know, there's no ad market, there's no ad exchange for mobile. It's very, very difficult. You have to have a gigantic sales force. So it's hard for a startup to, generate revenue in China. So the business models you see there are quite amazing. I remember first talking about a free-to-play model way back in 2004. I think Sharon was at the board meeting. It was like, let's make our games free. And everybody's like, what? There's no way we'll ever do that. We make products that cost money to make. We're not going to give them away for free. But now it's a ubiquitous process. That stuff started happening in China in early 2000. That's one aspect. The other aspect is the social nature of the culture is very different than here. They want to beat the shit out of each other. Look at how competitive they are when they play games. So you have to understand the local market much better. Entrepreneurs are just as good in the US. And I think, for a long time it was undiscovered, so valuations were relatively expensive relative to the US, but now it's largely discovered, so it's harder.
Great. You mentioned games. Sundeep, you have been investing in games early stage. You invested in Rovio, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And others. Talk about the gaming market now as it stands, 3 years post Zynga IPO, and King just went public and had, I think, struggled.
Yeah.
How do you guys look at the gaming market?
I don't know. I mean, people look at King and call it a failed IPO. It created $5.5 billion for a game that did not exist 18 months ago. Right? And they made more than $1 billion in the first year. When was the last time a company went from 0 to $1 billion in revenue and you call it a failed company? I think it's something that we basically plaster the games industry with, mainly because I think the multiples are 2 to 3 times revenue. Essentially, they tap out at that and they're unpredictable and so on. And maybe there's a different model for investing there. Early investors will always do well, but later investors kind of get shafted based on the public market. So maybe more dividend-based returns or whatever else needs to come in there. But Rovio was different for us. When a lot of people actually passed on Rovio, we couldn't find a co-investor for them initially when we met with them because they were looking to raise a smaller amount of money and people did not understand their model. They looked at them saying that, wait a second, they were comparing them to Zynga. What are your MAUs? What are your ARPDAUs and so on and so forth? And these guys are like, look, we're not a gaming company. We're like Disney. Right? We want to give our game away, and there's still 2 billion downloads later. They're essentially trying to monetize the Disney playbook. They want to come out with a movie. They sell half their revenue comes from merchandise. So it's very different. And they do like Angry Birds Cola, which outsells Coke and Pepsi in a bunch of countries. It's amazing, right? It's a very, very different company. So I think of that as an entertainment company rather than a gaming company. But gaming is different, and if you still look at it, I mean, last thing I looked at it, I think 80 or 90% of the top grossing apps in the App Store are still gaming, right? So it still continues to be a very, very fertile place for entrepreneurs to go in there and create a bunch of value very, very quickly. Some of them are not sustainable, as we've seen with like something like a Draw Something and so on. So different models have to be employed there, but it's amazing, what can be created in a short period of time.
One more question for Sharon, and we'll get to the audience Q&A. So Sharon, you talked about enterprise, criticism being the most recent one, but what are some of the big trends you're seeing from enterprise customers who are they were late to the market in some ways?
Yeah, they're late, but now they have a big sense of urgency because, in particular, because of all of their constituents are using mobile and need to access all their different assets. So you're seeing enterprises, migrate much more rapidly to the cloud. The two most recent additions to our team have both been from operations and the information security officer from Netflix, so Netflix runs everything in the cloud. They don't own a single server. So that's the sort of bleeding edge corporate architecture, and what we're working with those guys on is what's the migration path for businesses to get there. So you're seeing things, an entirely new security paradigm being put into place because the idea of building a firewall to harden the exterior of your business be completely irrelevant when there are thousands of endpoints, and especially when you get to Internet of Things, many, many times more different devices that are coming in and out of the network. And then, as referenced by the earlier panel, the productivity paradigm is very different. So how people access the corporate information, how it gets onto tablets and devices, how it gets mixed and mashed together with other data from outside the enterprise. That's not strictly speaking a mobile theme, but it always ends up being touched by mobile.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Questions from the audience? Questions? No questions. All right.
I'll buy a beer for every good question that gets asked.
All right. Okay, we'll keep going unless there's a question from the crowd. So a lot of talk about Internet of Things. So you mentioned that, a couple of other panelists earlier. Is that a new market, or is that a version of the mobile market? Anyone?
I think it's a version of the old light switches. I mean, it's not, the Internet of Things is just how you control stuff. I mean, I used to remember way back when I was trying to automate a house, everything was RS-232. I mean, it's just an extension of what's been going on for the last, couple of decades. I talked about the sprinkler system, connected to weather, connected to the soil samples, connected to the USGS. All this stuff should be connected. I mean, I think this is the greatest bundling device on the planet right now. It bundles and integrates everything in real time. I used to buy this $200,000 Control4 system. Hopefully nobody from Control4 here. That automates your house. Well, now I just have a Lutron lighting app. I have a security camera app. I've got a security app. And they're all in the little folder that says home. And if I want to control my TVs, I can turn on my Harmony remote. So I think it's an extension of, and it's a consumerization of stuff that's already existed and made it simple for the average consumer to use. I think that's what the Internet of Things is.
Right, well, and I think Internet of Things is even broader than all, those consumer applications are really great and easy to imagine, and we experience them, but I think of Internet of Things as a control paradigm, right? So, and there have been all kinds of control, maybe because I majored in decision and control engineering. So there have been all kinds of control systems for, industrial controls, environmental controls, retail controls, all these different things where we've needed to count, monitor, manage stuff. And the advent of, ubiquitous Wi-Fi and ubiquitous air coverage has stamped out a whole bunch of other investment notions that were prevalent 10 years ago about the use of Zigbee and all these other different communications protocols, RFID, that might have enabled the Internet of Things. And now because the world is filled with waves, and there are small cheap batteries, it's very easy to make the Internet of Things happen this time as opposed to the last two waves when it's been hypothesized to happen.
And if anybody's got a security scheme that would work for the Internet of Things, call me, because I think that's going to be one of the biggest opportunities on the planet. I mean, come on, you could break into a Tesla now, hack into a Tesla, and probably, blow it up if you want.
Right, the target breach was through a thermostat.
Yeah.
I think we have a question here.
Yes, thank you. I love the mic, that's why I'm always asking the mic to ask questions.
Can you just state your name and your organization? And
my pleasure.
Thank you.
My name is Phil Jody, and whatever I'm doing, a little bit French. Now, I just want to challenge you guys. I think I'm so proud to have a VC panel in front of me. I'm one of those guys who think that mobile is not about device, smartphone, whatever. It's more about the situation. Don't you think that we could have a surprise from another device that could create a significant new way of using something rather than mobile or a tablet, but something else. Do you think that's possible? Did you have some guys coming to you and say, hey, look, I have this or that?
So the question, I think, is there a new device, maybe a wristwatch or some other things that could be the access medium, and it's not just the mobile device as we know of today. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have, perfect. I think you have to think about mobile not as in the European sense of mobile is another word for phone. Like in the US, we said cell phone. In Europe, they said mobiles, right? I think of mobile as an investment opportunity, as an unwired device. So it could be many different things in the same way, Haney mentioned a shirt, right? That is clearly not a cell phone form factor,
right.
Yet one
It's a
could
mobile
argue
device.
that it's not mobile on its own, but when worn, it's mobile.
Yeah. Look, I think the answer is clearly yes. Clearly yes. I mean, there's some very interesting things. We're investors in a company that makes tiny, tiny sensors. And these sensors are, they're inundated by requests. We want to put you in speakers. We want to put you in bottles. We want to put you in refrigerators. We want to put you, refrigerator is not a mobile device, but it's going to start acting like a mobile device. Amana, I don't know if you guys have seen this. Amana has started creating these displays, and they've got literally like 6 or 7 different Kinect-like devices in these displays, so that when you go towards the refrigerator, the screen on the right pops up and it tells you what's in the refrigerator without having to open it. There's some really interesting stuff, and I'm not sure if this is called mobile or not, but to me, these are some of the technologies that are coming out of these connected devices that are ubiquitous.
One more question?
Yeah, hi, Damon Danielson, and just a slightly different take on something. What's the new number for traction where you go for a younger consumer-facing mobile business? Okay, you guys are working. I know it's kind of vague, depends on the business. Just interested to hear a take if you had to pick one number for number of users.
Sandeep?
Yeah, I think it entirely depends upon how much marketing you've done. I think that's basically it. I mean, in a lot of cases, people will end up building prototypes, releasing it to like 800 people, and just track until the next day retention is beyond 60%, right? So that could be one of the things, because you might never have spent enough money putting it out there. But all you want to do is, I mean, one of the amazing things about mobile, if you think about what people had to do 10, 15 years ago, they had to think about product, but after the product, they had to worry about sales and marketing, and after that, they had to worry about operations and support, right? Amazon took away a lot of the operations and support. And mobile, actually, increasingly, customer acquisition is becoming really, really simple as long as you can build a really, really good product core. Like, we had a company that went from 0 to 100 million in revenue in less than 12 months of operation, right? And you've seen like a WhatsApp go to like 0 to 500 million in 4 years. So you see these amazing companies. Mainly, if you build a really, really good product core, it spreads by itself almost, right? Or you see something like Candy Crush, where the wheels are so greased with Facebook install ads and Google ads and so on and so forth, that if you have an ability, a product market fit, and you know that if you acquire a user for a certain amount, I can get him to pay more than this, I can pump $100 million into it and I can blow it up, right? So if either you're in one of those two camps, unfortunately, the big problem in mobile right now is, unlike the web, where you could fragment this market, you could say, okay, you know what, my LTV is greater than my CAC, I can dump money, right? And you could do that across any keyword in the web. In mobile, unfortunately, because it's not keyword driven, right? You don't search for stuff and then you don't get bid against those keywords. What ends up happening is it's all screen real estate. So the people who are able to outbid everyone else on Facebook install ads, essentially the Candy Crushes of the world, basically win all this real estate over there. Everyone else has to depend on product virality. But what if you don't have product virality? That's the main issue in mobile today.
So for me, I mean, I actually don't care about traction, because you can buy traction, and that's not, to me, is not the investable way. I think what the most important thing is user engagement. Like, whatever the app is, user engagement is the most important thing. Hey, the average user uses my app 12 hours a day. I mean, that's pretty powerful. Let's get it in the hands of millions of users. But if your average user turns on the app once and never turns on again, that's not a very interesting investment.
And to that point, I think we saw a stat earlier that, I think if I'm right, it's 170 million users through the Flurry data. We know that 170 million people use their mobile phone at least 16 times a day. Is that right? Something along those lines. So that's
all? 16 times a day?
16 times a day, once an hour, maybe almost an
I've
hour.
opened this thing like 4 or 5 times. Just
Well, you're an
sitting here.
outlier. You got the shirt, you got the whole thing going. So there's one more question I thought here at the end. Is that right? Do we still have time for that? Richard, can we do one more? Okay, last
We're
one.
done.
Wait, one more? Okay, thank you. Just shout it out.
Henny, you mentioned that it's very hard to generate revenue in China. Henny, you mentioned it's very hard to generate revenue in China. So what are the successful monetization strategies you've seen? And I'd also like to get thoughts from Sharon and Sandeep. Thank you.
Sure. So I said it's very hard to generate advertising revenue in China. One of our best portfolio companies went public last year, a company called YY. If you guys know YY, YY is this platform for people to converse, talk, video and audio. It started off being as a gaming platform for people to communicate when they're doing their Counter-Strike games, so you can get your squad all lined up. That was the majority of the business. Then some user decided to start singing karaoke on it and became a very popular singer. And now about half the business is entertainment related and the other half is still gaming. And the way it's monetized is through microtransactions. If you want to throw a rose to this singer, it costs you 30 cents to throw a rose. If you want to throw a tomato, it costs you $2 to throw a tomato. And so they've figured out a really creative way to monetize the platform. And it's a couple $100 million company, $3 billion market cap right now on NASDAQ. So they've done very, very well using microtransactions as a mechanism to monetize users. No advertising whatsoever.
All right, I get to ask the last question. So you guys are all in the venture business, so we are often wrong but never in doubt, right? So one prediction from each of you about the future of mobile, or something about the world that you are in, and it could be anything.
I think the world's going to change at the end of this year, towards the end of this year, with a new device.
Great.
Not Oculus. It's not going to be Oculus.
I'm actually, I mean, this is less a prediction and then a more, I hope it becomes the reality. But, I documented my time on mobile, and about 90% of my time I spent on my phone, and then about 9% on a laptop and 1% on a tablet. So I'm hoping that this is the only device I carry, and wherever I go, everything else becomes a screen. So I come home, I plug it somewhere, and then you have Oculus or you have some other kind of virtual reality, and that's your consumption screen. You walk into your office, you put it on a dock, everything else basically becomes that. So this is kind of a variation of a network computer, if you will. Everyone's hoping that we have some kind of bioauthentication device, and that's all you need. And all your applications, everything else lives in the cloud. And wherever you go, you just tap, and then that's it. The rest of the stuff comes in. So that's one paradigm of mobile, where all the compute and the data and the applications live in the cloud, and you just basically use some form of authentication device. I'm hoping the opposite is true, which is this becomes a compute device, and everything else just translates to a screen.
Cool. You guys see that movie with the thing you touch a glass and it becomes a screen based on how you touch it? There's a movie about that.
Yeah, the
What was
Tom
the
Cruise movie. Was that one?
No.
Anyways. Sharon.
Okay, I'm going to say that the presence of all the sensors and health information available through mobile, let's just say mobile, not your phone, fundamentally changes the health culture in America and helps us become not the most obese country in the world.
Everyone.
Well, here's hoping to that. Thank you, the panel, and thank you, audience, for your questions.